Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Daniel Bowles. We're back with a new Off the Beaten Path, a podcast for basketball coaches living in obscurity, working in obscurity, and even those who have made it out of obscurity.
It's a place for storytelling where even some of those stories are true, learning, reconnecting, and reconnecting at times, food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly. And today we have a great guest here. We have Joe Niland, has decades of head coaching experience, decades of assistant coaching experience, and now he's went to almost the dark side. He's an administrator. We still love him though, and he's going to walk us through a lot of things through his past, but also his family. He has a basketball family. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Glad to have you, Joe.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it coming on.
All right. Well, let's get it started. What got you into basketball? We kind of know the answer, but we want you to tell everybody else. What got you into this crazy business?
Well, my father was a longtime coach, and my uncles were coaches. My dad actually played basketball in the late 30s, early 40s, was one of the best athletes in the Western New York area, grew up in the Buffalo area, and he was a coach at Canisius College back in the late 40s, early 50s, when Canisius was playing big time schedules. And he was very successful. He beat the CCNY team that won the national tournament, the NCAA and the NIT, beat them twice, once in the Garden. Beat Arkansas, Utah, a lot of great teams back in those days. When I came along, he had left Canisius College, kind of had a run in with the administration there, and coached briefly in the old Eastern League. And when I came along, he was back coaching high school, kind of similar to another mentor of mine. Went up and came back down. But so I grew up, he was coaching Bishop Ryan High School in east side of Buffalo, New York, a small Catholic boys high school run by the Franciscan Fathers. And I was with him almost the whole way. And so that really, I was a rapid sports fan, but I was in practices and I met a bunch of people that I had to think back on later in life, like my dad would introduce me to like Ray Meyer, or somebody like that. And I go, oh, okay. And just, as you're a kid, you just, who's Ray Meyer to you, or who's, Claire B, all these kind of people I met just, oh, this is a friend of my dad's. And Pete Newell used to call our house. And,
wow.
My dad go, oh, that's Petey Newell. And I'm like, who's Petey Newell? You're a kid. You don't know. We'd go to a ball game somewhere or something. We're at the Final Four one year. And Kurt Gowdy comes by and, the legendary announcer. Well, Kurt Gowdy played on the Great Wyoming team of the early 40s against my uncle and my dad. And, he kind of tells stories, and I'm like, you just don't pay attention to those things. When you're a kid,
basketball royalty.
Yeah, well, you just don't, you don't know that. And then, as I got older, I'm like, oh, wow. So, I really tried not to get into coaching, and my dad kind of tried to steer me away from it. And, but then I ended up in it. So,
Well, Coach, I'm looking at your bio right now. I was going to say you didn't really have a choice. It looks like it was there.
So well, actually, what had happened was, I wasn't a very good player. I was a decent player, and I didn't do well at St. Leo's. Ended up back in Buffalo, and barely could get back in the University of Buffalo. And so a buddy of mine, where I used to work out a lot at the YMCA, ran the basketball there, and he got me coaching this team. And, you know, it was like a 13 or 14-year-old team. And we won this big Western New York Marine Midland Bank tournament. And I enjoyed it, had a little fun doing it, but, just kind of didn't pay attention to it. Well, later that year, my aunt, one of my dad's sisters, was a Catholic nun. She had a school on the east side of Buffalo, St. Mary's of Sorrows, and her coach, uh, I don't know what happened. I think he got arrested, but I don't know what really happened. So she called me up and said, "Hey, I need you to come down, do some PE classes, and take care of my basketball team." So I did it, and we ended up in the Final Four of the Western New York Diocesan Tournament and had a pretty good year. Now we had some good players. It wasn't really anything I did. We were in an area, Buffalo, where you couldn't help but get good players, and so I kind of really enjoyed doing that. And that guy at the YMCA, Neil DeLeo, said, "You're pretty good at it. You might want to look into doing it." But I still was like, "Nah." My dad was like, "Nah, don't do it." Don't do it. But eventually, I ended up doing it.
Well, let's stop you right there for a second. We had Dip Mitras on here last time, and Dip was telling us the same thing. If you're any good at it, you had people telling you not to do it. so here you were. You had people not only that were in it, but that were in your family saying, "All right, look, let's keep pushing you to this other job. Let's keep doing this." And you still couldn't fight it. You still couldn't fight it off.
Well, I asked my dad when I got a little older, and I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, when you left Canisius in 1955, obviously you had pretty good things going. Why didn't you go for another college job?" And he said, "Well," he said, "Everett Case wanted me to come down to North Carolina State and be his assistant." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't you do that?" And he said, "Well, I didn't really want to move my family to Raleigh, North Carolina." And, he had played in an All-American game in the early 40s for Sam Barry. And he was out on the West Coast. He was in Europe and that war ended, and he was on the West Coast with his army unit ready for the invasion of Japan. They were placed out there, and he was working out every day with Sam Barry's USC teams. By the way, Tex Winter was one of the players on that team, and Bill Sharman and those guys. So,
wow.
I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, they wanted me. I could have went to the West Coast." I'm like, "And why didn't you do that?" He said, "Well, I did. They want to move the family around and stuff like that." So that was kind of his thing. If basketball at the college level can be an unstable lifestyle, and you got to remember, 50 years, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, people that were transient in life, that wasn't supposed to be a good lifestyle. Things we celebrate today,
yeah.
Materialism and all this stuff. Yeah. Back then, you were, get a good job, stable life, family, things like that were celebrated. So, that's where his logic was coming from.
Yeah. I just love that he had the definite New Yorker calling Pete Newell Petey. You had to add the IE or the Y on everybody's name. I never heard it added on Petey. I love it. That might have been the only guy that called him Petey, right?
might have been, yeah.
Either him or probably every other New Yorker, right? But anyway, all right. So let's start walking through it now. So you get the bug at the YMCA. Sister gets you on with a Catholic school. Seems like your journey is a lot of private schools, as we ruin the end of the story here. Not all Catholic, but a lot of private schools. So walk us, where does that go next as you enter your transient life?
Well,
to go down.
I do another year with at St. Mary's of Sorrows, and which was there was a little article Eric Brady did in USA Today about that, because when Beeline was getting ready to, my cousin John was getting ready to play Michigan, they had Loyola had Sister Jean. So Eric Brady, who was, wrote for USA Today for years as a Buffalo guy, and he had known my aunt, Sister Francis. So he called me because he wondered if John had worked for her. I said, no, I think I was the only one stupid enough to work for her. And I told the story at the time. It was like working for Steinbrenner. I thought we were pretty good. We made it to the Final Four. There were 24 teams in the tournament, 24 teams at that time in Western New York, or 24 conferences in the Catholic League. And, Sister was like unhappy. And and the other thing was, we had no gym. We were one of the few Catholic schools in Buffalo with no gym. So we were practicing everywhere. And my aunt was a type of a person that she would just call up the phone. She'd call up the head of Parks and Recreation in Buffalo, and she taught a lot of these guys. She'd say, like, hey, Jerry Stockman, I need the JFK Center today from 3 to 5. My team will be there. Just hang up. But, and she asked me, so how can we win it all? And I said, well, we have good talent. Yeah, we have good talented kids. I said, Sister, but there was a school right in our same part of Buffalo called the Diocesan Educational Center, and they took about 5 of the old German parishes, which became more African American, and they combined them into one school. Well, you had the school, their front line in 8th grade was 6'5", 6'6", coming off the bench, 6'4". I'm out there with a 6'1" guy. Now, we had some really great guards, but I said, I need a couple big kids. So I come to school. This was right after Christmas. I come back to school, and she said, yeah, I got a 6'2" kid for you. She went out at Christmas.
Here's your Christmas present. He's not quite 6'5", though.
Not quite 6'5", and the way the brackets were done, which was kind of unfair. Some of the big suburban Buffalo schools, when they did the bracket, which was supposed to be a draw, they always would end up opposite of where I was. And for me to get to the championship game, we had to play DEC. I was hoping we'd be on the other side, but it worked out in the long run, and that really got me going. And actually, Bob McKinnon, whose son Bobby coached at North Carolina with Matt Dorian and stuff. Bob saw us play in a tournament. I think it was against St. Gregory's, where he was a parishioner, and Bob was coached the St. Louis Spirits with Fly Williams and those guys in the ABA. He was coach at Canisius College. He played for my dad in the early 50s. He was at the game, and he came up afterwards and he said, Joey, as they called me, hey, Joey, you did a pretty good job with that team, and so that made me think it was somebody. I wasn't going to get anything like that from my dad. My dad would just say something like, need to go find better players. That was always his analogy. But so then I moved to Florida. I kind of wanted to get the reasoning. Well, one was to get out of the weather, but two, I was under, there wasn't a place I turned. I wasn't Joe Niland's kid. And, I wanted to say, if I can do this, I want to be able to do it on my abilities, not that, I'm this guy's son. And so I got down there, and sure enough, somebody told me, hey, you need to go see Gordon Gibbons over at Tampa Catholic. And I knew who Gordon was because I followed a little bit of, basketball from my friends down there who were at St. Leo at the time. And went over and hooked up with Gordon. And then, he was like the Pied Piper of Florida basketball. It just took off.
Well, we joke on this show. We say somehow every show we have ties into the Florida basketball mafia or Division III basketball. And right here, you tie into both technically.
Zen.
We'll get to that with your brother in a minute. But so you get with Coach G. I mean, how different was it than Buffalo? Obviously, the weather way different, but just the people, the basketball culture, Coach G himself. How different was all that for you?
Well, it was really good. It wasn't, basketball people are basketball people. I mean, and, we were joking around before about the length of after practice talks. I mean, I grew up waiting for my dad in the gym, forever, and used to get pissed when somebody would take the balls and put them up,
Yeah.
which the managers were trying to do, or whoever
So they
was
could
running
leave.
it. They wanted to go home. So they were putting the balls up, which meant as a kid, you had nothing to do. So I was used to that. And, started me thinking back of, sitting in the gym and my dad and Jack Ramsey and Tate Slock talking about the direct drive step versus the crossover. You know, you're a kid like going, God, can we go get something to eat?
I love
But,
it. I love it.
stuff like that. So, there wasn't now what Gordon really exposed me to. And one of the things there was a lot of people that should get credit for the growth of basketball in Florida, but certainly Gordon and a core of guys at that time had a lot to do with the growth of basketball to where it is today. And I kind of saw the ground floor of that. Coach G was coming back from the University of South Florida, and he was, trying to get himself back up the plane. And,
What year was this, Joe? What year was
this
this?
was 83. I think it was 1983,
Mhm.
82. I know I'm getting old enough, it's hard to put the years together. But I think it was 82, 83, 83, something in there.
Mm.
Might have been 82. And, so he was, and he put together, it was kind of funny. A quick story to the side. So I meet him, and he's got this team, and I think it was a fall league. It might have been the fall league or summer league, something. And he says, "Hey," he said, "yeah, could you go over to Jesuit? We got a summer league game, and the coaches who had the second game got to referee the first game or something like that." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll go do it." And he was busy doing something. So I get over there, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here with Tampa Catholic," and I just get the complete cold shoulder. I mean, these coaches are all giving me the cold shoulder, and I'm like, damn, guess a Yankee, the people don't like me or something. But so I do the game, and then G shows up, for our game about 10 minutes before our game's supposed to start. G shows up, and we play and play well. It's really my first able to watch Gordon coach, which was very entertaining. And, kind of, of course, we wind down afterwards and talk about it. And it kind of dawns on me, I'm driving home thinking, okay, we got Kurt Pfizer coming over from Chamberlain, you know, we're putting this team together. So yeah, there's some, like Gordon's back in the high school ranks, and now some of these guys that didn't like him very much were like, I didn't know that. I thought everybody liked him. But and it was just a competitive nature of coaches. So that was my first introduction there. And then, we had, Gordon does a terrific job with his coaching, and we had a really good first 5 or 6 players. And and it was hard because I don't know, he took over for a guy who had an unbelievable group of players and won like 30 games every year, but he couldn't get past the first game in the district tournament. And Gordon we didn't have that quite good a talent as that guy had, but Gordon was like, we're going to win the district. We're going to win the district. And we had a lot of fun. It was, and the other thing was we played everybody, anybody that wanted to play, we played. And you know how the G is with that. So we got to Florida Southern.
So, Coach, we're
that
kind of
changed
aside
one
from
thing,
there. One of the goals on our podcast is we like young guys, especially who are getting in the business to kind of figure, to learn some things. So, basketball aside, when you make a move as far as you did, what were some challenges you had of going from New York to Florida, family, all those things? I'm sure working with Coach G was a different thing, but what were some things that if you had a young guy who has a chance to take a job kind of somewhere else, what were some things that you had or some advice for them?
Well, it's funny talking about that because on the administrative side, which I've been doing off and on a dual role since the mid 90s. I try to, when I had a girl in my office the other day that wants to get in athletics, specifically college athletics or professionally more on the administrative side. And I was telling her, are you willing to work for nothing? This is a business where internships, volunteering, you got to prove your worth, and you're not going to get paid for it. Are you willing to do that? And a lot of people today, they want to walk around with a shirt on, and they want to show up on game day, but that's a very minor piece of being a coach or anything in athletics. And I relate it to everybody sees the game. All the fans show up, they're at the game, they watch the game, it's great. That's like going to a movie and you watch the movie and really enjoy it. But that movie took 3 years or more to make for that 2 hours. And there are a lot of people in that movie that, yeah, you see the stars and stuff, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that'll never see a dime off that movie, who work for free, who are just trying to get their foot in the door in the entertainment business. Athletics is exactly the same way. I'll give you a really quick story on that. Mike Gottfried and Joe Gottfried, I became good friends with them. Mike was a longtime football coach at Pitt and Cincinnati and Kansas, and then he was ESPN analyst. Well, Mike, we're one night talking, and Mike was telling a story how he was at Pitt and he was doing one of those clinics, all the high school and people come to, like the Nike clinics in basketball. And a guy came up afterwards, a young guy, and he said, hey, I'd really like an opportunity to come work for you at Pitt. And Mike said, great. As a big time coach, you get any coach, really head coach, get people come up and say that to you. So Mike said, yeah, come see me sometime or something like that. Well, the next day he's in his office and the secretary said, Coach, there's a young man out here who said that you said to come see him. And he was like, he's like, yeah, tell him that, I'm busy today or something. Well, the guy wouldn't leave and he just sat there. So finally, the secretary kept pestering Gottfried and he said, well, does he have anything with him? She said, yeah, I think he has a resume or something. He said, well, tell him I'll walk out. I'll give him 2 minutes. And so he goes out and the guy says, hey, yeah, played high school and college football. I was helping a little bit in a local high school. And I work on the Pennsylvania State Turnpike as a toll keeper. And Mike said, okay, great. Let me have your resume. And, if something comes open, I'll give you a call. So the guy leaves. Well, John Fox was Gottfried's defensive coordinator. Fox gets a call to go to the NFL. So he leaves. Well, then Gottfried moves up next guy. He's got an opening. So he calls this, just happenstance. So he says, oh, that guy was in the other day. Let me call him. We'll get him in here. He'll be the intern. And that guy was Mike McCarthy.
Oh,
Nice.
The guy goes from working the toll on the Pennsylvania State Turnpike to, winning the Super Bowl and now head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. But there's a lot of luck to it. But one of the things, guys like Mike Gottfried or Gordon Gibbons or people like that, ability, you're going to be around and exposed to enough people that you can get a job. Now, you may have to work for free, or you may have to work for a little camp money, or you may have to work for some road meal money, or however you can scrounge up money. But that's how you break in this business. You're not going to break in as the number one assistant at Louisville.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff right there. All right, so take us from Tampa Catholic. Do you stay with Coach G his whole reign there?
No, I was there.
How did that happen?
I was there 2 years. I sent you that picture with where we're all like Mike Moran, Coach G, and myself. There's like 3 of us there standing there right before this game. We were playing Camden, New Jersey. They were number 1 in the country. I had Kevin Walls. He was averaging like almost 50 points a game. And they had just been in New York for Christmas, and they were beating the New York City schools by like 50. And so, G, he's going to play everybody, right? And so we go up, and they were playing Hales, Ocala Vanguard on like a Thursday night. And then we were going to play them Friday night. And then they were playing Clearwater or Miami High on Saturday, or maybe Jesuit, one of those. So I go up, me and Moran go up to Ocala, and Haley, which is not Haley's deal. Haley comes out, gets in his zone, and they really kind of hold the ball a little bit. And Camden's, Clarence Turner, the legendary Camden coach. I mean, they're like Kevin Walls at 6 foot, everybody else like 6'7", and they're just sitting in a zone. So the game's kind of slow. And then Camden goes on a little bit of run. They get in their pressure defense. And then Haley just goes, the heck with this. We're going back to the old Vanguard way. And I think it ended up like, I don't know, 120 to 80 or something like that. Camden beat him. So I'm riding back, and I'm like, there's no way in heck that we didn't have the depth. We had a very good front 5 or 6, like I said earlier, but we didn't, there's no way to stay with them with their depth. And they were beating the New York City school teams like that, 100 to 8, 100 to 50 and stuff. So G had a great game plan, and we do everything like our horns action, 5 to flex. We ran a lot into the flex, and we were real patient. We had a kid, Gerald White, who was about 6'5", played at South Florida. We had Kurt Pfizer went on and played at Rollins. He was 6'6", really could shoot it. Had a kind of a tall, lanky guard named Dave Chimura that was a good player. And then we were just solid. And so we came out, great game plan, worked it. But that picture is right before the game. And you know how G would look down at the other bench? And so he's looking down there. Clarence Turner's like, he didn't come out and shake our hands, didn't do anything. He's just sitting on the bench watching his team warm up. You know how G is. He's so fired up. He's looking down. And I can't say what he probably said because there'd be a few cuss words. But I don't think they knew what we were going to do. I think they did, but I think they felt, we were up 21-17 at half. And they couldn't, they tried to pressure us, but we were good offensively, really good. G had us well drilled. We packed in a good man-to-man defense, and we had a good little guard. Ended up going to Dillard. I don't know if he played at Dillard, but he could sit down and defend. And we had him bottled up. And then second half, I think they went up 33-30, and it ended up winning like 41-37 against us. And we were right. We were right there. It was one of those games that we were right there, and we just,
Well, the guy definitely didn't get his 50-point average.
no, I think he ended up with like 20 something, but I remember Dennis Still, whose brother Art Still played with the Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis actually signed with South Alabama, I think that year. He was coming off the bench, and we were coming off the bench with Nelly Russo, who was a good kid from Brandon at about 6'1". Dennis Still was like 6'7", Division I player. So
that's good stuff right there. All right, so take us. You go to, how do you get the University of Tampa?
Well, I was, Gordon was doing Team Florida, and we were doing a lot of stuff. So I helped a little bit with Team Florida, but I had to have a full-time job. So I was working for the Department of Children's Services, and my job usually was at night. So I'd work from 11 to 7, either in the runaway center or in the emergency shelter. And, I'd go in, sleep, get up, sleep, and then go coach, and then that type of thing. So I couldn't travel as much with the AAU, but I coached the 15 under team, me and a guy named Will Ward, Big Red, the legendary Big Red. And we had a kid, David Walker, went on to South Carolina State, and Darren Moochie Johnson. And I'm trying to think, I don't know if Gerald was on that team, but we ended up winning the state, beat Chris Corciani's team out of Miami, 15U.
Big win.
But because of my exposure, Donnie Owens at Florida College, it was a junior college at the time, Donnie had an opening on his staff, and he called me. He called Gordon first, but he called me and said, hey, I'm looking for somebody. Would you be interested? You can recruit, and it was a good program. So I went with Donnie Owens, was there about 3 years. Same time, Richard Schmidt had just started the Tampa program, and Richard and I became kind of friends. Don Bostic, those guys down there, I did camps with them, and I really got to know them. Brian Sabian, when I was at St. Leo, was an assistant baseball coach there. And Brian went on and became assistant at Tampa, then became the head coach at Tampa, then became the director of scouting for the New York Yankees, and then became the president and general manager of San Francisco Giants. So, I was connected, and so after a couple years with Florida College, Richard Schmidt was like, he tried to get me over there for nothing, but I was now being also paid by Florida College. So I, like Coach Schmidt, I do have this other job working at night, but Florida College pays me, I would like a little compensation to help you. So he goes, yeah, I understand. And so eventually he worked out a deal where I could go there and help him, but it was still part-time. And he had a terrific program, and he also was an excellent basketball coach who started, he was the first coach at Louisville Ballard High School, and they won like their first 70 games or something.
So you've just slowly made the climb here. You went from YMCA to middle school to high school to assistant to junior college to now Division II.
Just slowly making the climb, and it was like a 10-year climb to get to that point, but it was basketball, and I really enjoyed it, and being with Gordon, I mean, Ed Kirshner, Jim Haley, Glenn Wilkes, Don Wallen, I was there when Shaky Rodriguez brought up his first Miami High team, and his assistants were Frank Martin and Anthony Grant. It was Jack Wilson over at Clearwater High, Jack Coit at St. Pete High. I mean, just Bernard Wilkes up at Ribault, and it was just a lot of fun and a lot of guys. Ed Kirshner was at Kissimmee Osceola. He had Frank Ford and Jimmy McCrimmon and those guys. It was a great time in Florida as basketball was really coming alive.
So you are officially part of the Florida basketball mafia, then, as Corey likes to put it.
Yeah, I'm right in the mix of it.
You couldn't be a made man though. You were from New York.
No, I didn't have those floor. But Jim Haley was a Illinois guy.
Oh,
Roger
okay.
Dorio's an Illinois guy. Don Wallen was from Indiana. Kirshner was originally from Indiana. So there's a lot of transplants in there.
Coacher may be the only Florida guy, right?
Him and Shaky.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. What was it like in junior college during that time? I know Florida's always known as so much high basketball in their junior colleges.
Well, that was another great experience in the junior college ranks. Florida Junior College probably was at the best at that time. You had Bill Alheim at Miami-Dade North, a legendary coach. You had Joe Fields up at Lake City. The Panhandle. You had what was it? I can't remember his name at Chipola. Guy was a legend. OW. There was just so much good basketball. Benny Gabbard at Central Florida, and Indian River. Mike Leatherwood, Bill Payne over at Seminole. Daytona Beach, Ray Ridenauer. It was just tons of good basketball and a lot of good players. So we had, and that was the other thing. I was able to meet so many guys. I think it was my first or second year at Florida College. We had like 10 or 11 Division I signees. And so every day in our gym were, there was Division II and Division I assistant coaches watching every practice. Bob Huggins was an assistant at Central Florida. He came down with Chuck Maychuk to start the Central Florida when they were Division I. Mike Backus and L.J. Kilby. You know L.J. Kilby, don't you? That was a Georgia Southern assistant coaches. Yeah. And I'll give you another story. This is a crazy story because did you remember Frank Kearns at Georgia Southern?
Yeah.
Legendary coach, right?
Yeah.
Well, we had a kid, Brian Newton, played at Jefferson High School in Tampa. And he was a really good player as a sophomore. I think that was my first or second year at Tampa Catholic. And then he got hurt and was just so-so, had a bad knee, or as they called in those days, bum knee. And so Donnie signed him at Florida College, and he didn't play his first year. He played like 2 minutes a game because he was one of those guys, his knee swelled up all the time. So that summer they go back in and they find out he has knee swelling up because there's stuff floating around and they take it out. And we had Fred Callaway who signed with Marshall, Alan Herman, Dexter. We had this loaded squad. So Brian comes back to practice, and we always did a big jamboree in the fall, early fall, like late September over at Eckerd. And everybody in the Southeast would be there. And Backus and Kilby came in and watched us practice the day before the jamboree. And they're like, man, who is this kid? Newton's just killing it. Well, he's got his flexibility and his agility and his mobility back, and he's tearing everybody up. And so, they come in the office and they say, what do you think? And I'm like, this is what he looked like as a sophomore in high school. Now he's bigger, stronger. And he only averaged 2 points, 2 rebounds last year. Like, yeah, because he didn't play. But you saw him now. And I said, if you guys wait too long and he starts playing, he's going to be better than Georgia Southern. So anyways, he played pretty well in the jamboree. And, jamboree is one of those things, you know how it is, Corey. You're playing everybody and, you're just trying to get guys in. And so they want to sign him. And I'm sitting in the office one day, and my office and the secretary's office were shared, and Coach Owens' office was in a separate room, and he wasn't in there yet. And Florida College is a Church of Christ school, so it's very conservative. And so I see the secretary answer the phone, and I see her getting a little flustered. And she was like, "Well, sir, Coach Owens isn't there, but Coach Niland's here." And this was one where you punch the button to answer the phone. So she hung it up, and she said, "There's a very rude man from Georgia." So I pick it up, and it's Kearns, the colonel, and he just starts off like with some very colorful language, and why the heck, should I sign a guy who averages 2 points a game? What were Kit Backus and Kilby down there just drinking, or what was going on? And so I said, "Look, Coach Owens is not here. You don't know me from Adam. I'm just telling you, if you don't sign this kid now, you may not get him." Yeah. That's probably what's going to happen. And he kind of had some more colorful words, and then he hung up. And so sure enough, they sign him, and Brian Newton becomes their lead player and takes them, to the NCAA tournament. And so that was in probably 84 or 5. And 1994, Frank Kearns is inducted into the Spring Hill College Sports Hall of Fame because he was the coach at Spring Hill College in the 70s.
Wow.
So I walk up to him and I said, "Coach Kearns, I'm Joe Niland. I was an assistant at Florida College who helped you go to the national tournament."
Did he cuss you out some more?
He cussed me out a little bit more.
That sounds about right. That's a great story. Oh man, that's awesome. So when you go from high school to JUCO now to Division II, and is Tampa is it a Catholic
No,
school?
Tampa's, it's private.
Okay, I knew it was
It's
private.
a private school, and it wasn't anything. I don't know, Corey, if you've been down to Tampa lately.
Oh, Tampa's unbelievable now.
It wasn't anything like that. Yeah. I mean, we were about ready to close the doors every year. Wow. And actually one year I used to get, I got like $400 a month. It was like $4,800 for the year. And so, in those days, there was no direct deposit. You had to go get your paycheck. And I went to Buffalo for like a couple of weeks, and I was working camps or something. So I called the secretary. I said, "Hey, Marge," I said, I'm gonna be back tomorrow. Will you put those 2 paychecks?" Because it was like 2 months. And she goes, "You're gonna have to talk to Coach Schmidt when you get back."
He wasn't there to get them, so they got cut.
They got cut.
That's classic.
And but the campus was, it had that beautiful plant hall, with the minarets but everything else on campus was pretty run down. Now the Martinez Center was kind of brand new, and but it didn't look as nice as it does today. But it was a nice building. But everything from plant hall to the Martinez Center, you would try to avoid bringing guys through.
You would never give the full tour?
No. And but Coach Schmidt, before I got there in Boston, had just unbelievable amount of success and players. And when I got there, I was able to help them get a few guys and bring some kids in. And it was really a good time. Bostic was a very smart basketball guy. Richard Smith, I mean, he's as good as it gets. And, able to see, I was able to, learn from my dad, from the coaches I had, from my uncles, growing up in Buffalo, and then Coach Gibbons, and then now different way of doing things with Coach Schmidt. So I was able to see a lot of basketball. I didn't know I absorbed things when I was a kid, but I did pick things up. And, and then, just, now it was Coach Schmidt and learning a different way. And Don Bostic was extremely smart and very intelligent. And so it was a great learning experience. And I think we were, I know the one year we were number one in the country for a while, and had some had a really good team. And Coach Schmidt was one of these guys, and I really believed it too. I like big guards, and I was at Florida College, really working hard on recruiting, big guards, and I kept running into this guard at Gaither High School named Kevin Starnes, and he was small. You look a lot like Kevin a little bit, Corey, and
Good looking
and
fella.
and, and actually Coach Schmidt's son played on the same team, and I'm like, Coach, I really think you need to look at Kevin. And he goes, old Stumpy Starnes. He goes, he's a sawed off little guy. We can't win with him. And I'm like, Coach, I see it, I feel it, but every time I watch this kid play, he dominates the game. I said, he there's something about this kid that I don't know. I just think you need to take a look at. And I saw what really convinced me. Gaither played Lakeland Kathleen in I think it was the regionals at Lakeland Kathleen, and they had Livingston Chapman, played at Florida on the Final Four team. Deron Hayes, who went up, scored 1,000 points at Penn State. Eric Grace, who played at American University, and two guards that went on and played somewhere. But it was Lakeland Kathleen. They were loaded. Starnes comes in the gym, packed house, and Gaither dominates the game until Starnes fouls out in the last minute, and they end up losing by a point or two. But he absolutely dominated the game. It's like he had a magic spell on everybody in the gym. And, I kind of convinced Coach Schmidt. I said, Coach, you need to sign this kid. And Coach Schmidt signed him. And I think Kevin Starnes' starting record at Tampa is like, 101 and 20 or something. So I learned a lot there at Tampa.
So from Tampa, you get a call from Coach G. Were you ready to get back with him, or how did that transition go?
Oh, that happened. We obviously see G a lot on the road and post games and different things. That happened really late in the summer. And we just had a really nice signing class at Tampa, and George Schultz, real late in the summer, the head coach at Florida Southern, takes a job with the Orlando Magic, and that happened, I want to say, like this time, like late August. And so Gordon calls me, and he still was living in Tampa at the time, and he said, hey, meet me at this place on Del Mabry. And so we meet, and he said, look, George is going to take this job. Would you be interested in coming over to Florida Southern full time? And I said, were you going to get the job? And he goes, no, it's going to be interim. And I'm like, oh God. So, we talk a little bit. I said, well, yeah, I'm interested. I said, but, now I'd been with Hillsborough County almost 9 years. So I'm getting close to the point of being vested in a public job. And I'm thinking, well, it's a chance to be a full-time college assistant, but on an interim basis. And so, that took a lot of talking. And I actually went over and I said, hey, Gordon, do you mind if I go talk to Hal Smeltsley, the AD at Florida Southern? Because I wanted to kind of gauge. I knew would have a chance of being very good because Gordon's a very good coach. But Florida Southern's the kind of place that attracts a lot of good coaches. And I wanted to kind of get a read to see where Smeltsley was at, whether Gordon really had a chance. And, Gordon's so confident and that he's like, oh, don't worry, the job, I have the job. Well, that was easy for Gordon to say. I had a couple little kids at the time and I'm in a good job. And, I'm like, okay. So he said, yeah, go over and talk to Smeltsley. So I talked to Smeltsley and I'm like, does Gordon have a chance? I'm interested in coming on. I knew Smeltsley a little bit because the Tampa Florida Southern rivalry was so good. And Smeltsley was always coming to me as the assistant, telling me I need to keep our guys under control because our Tampa guys were a little bit edgy. We liked them to be edgy. They didn't have that stuffiness. I don't want to say stuffiness, but Florida Southern kind of carried themselves like North Carolina, that air of, and we were more like UNLV. But so Smeltsley was like, yeah, he said, Gordon, he's a terrific coach and you guys, things work well and, there's not going to be a problem. And so, I went home, talked to my wife. I said, look at this, I'm 1 year away from being vested with Hillsborough County. If I step away, I'm probably, I'm going to take off in this track. And actually, it was for less money, too. My full-time position now with Hillsborough County was paying pretty good, plus the money when they did show up with the money at Tampa. That was good, too. But now, Florida Southern was a chance to go full-time and be back with G. I was pretty confident we would do well. Not as confident as Gordon was, but I was still pretty confident.
It's neat doing this show. We have a lot of parallels with that the shows take, and every guy usually has a situation that they probably shouldn't do, but they do it, and it ends up being the deal breaker, what gets them over the top. And sounds like that kind of was the deal with you. Going back to Florida Southern, probably not the best with Coach G, probably not the best business decision. But if it worked, it would be.
Well, and that was kind of my position was, I really enjoyed it at Tampa. I could have stayed on there and just worked with Hillsborough County and with Richard, and I'd probably been retired 5 years ago with the county and working for Richard full time playing golf. But because Richard's still coaching, he turns 80.
Years, I look.
He turns 80, I think, September 2nd.
That's crazy.
But, this was a chance. It was kind of like, if I'm going to do this for a living, I got to make this move. And so we made the move. Now, the crazy part is we start out, and Florida Southern always started after Labor Day. So, Labor Day comes, we start school. No Larry Murphy, our point guard, who's the coach at Gibbs High School now. And Gordon's like, where's Murph? Blah, blah, blah. So he gets a hold of somebody. Well, Murph, like a lot of kids, probably every kid in school, got a letter over the summer that, you owe $50 for dorm damage or some crazy thing. And if you don't pay it by this time, you can't come back to school. So Murph and his mom, like, well, okay, we can't afford it. Not coming back to school. Well, here's like the freshman of the year point guard.
I laugh because I just know anybody watching this that coaches knows what's going on right now.
Yeah.
A parking ticket on campus or something.
Yeah.
AD here, I guess I should say an AD I have because I don't want to. It's always something. Well, AD always says it makes them laugh. We'll fight a kid over $50 that his pay is, $13K for the year at school or whatever. But go ahead. It just makes me laugh.
So anyways, we get it worked out, and I got to go pick up Murph and bring him to school, and then we really get rolling. We had Gordon had recruited some guys in. Derek Flowers out of Winter Haven was a senior, and he ended up being an All-American. Calvetti Pate out of Miami, and George Nunez, and Murph, and we had big Jason Shin, a Lakeland kid, and we're pretty good. And we go on a run to start the season, and we're in Alaska. We play Alaska Anchorage, which was a D2 power, and Gordon flies up early, and he sees them beat UCLA or somebody. They beat somebody, I forget who it was, in the shootout. And we roll in 2 days after the shootout, and we're playing not on campus. We're playing downtown Sullivan Arena, and we just beat the dog stew out of them. I mean, we just roll them. And of course, then we come back, and Bo Clark comes in with Flagler, and we just squeak out a win because Bo, he did some things that take stuff away, and a lot of schools just when they were just going head to head with us, and we were pretty good. But we go on a run, and then by Christmas we get they take the interim tag off, and then of course I was there 2 more years. We won the conference tournament that year. Next year we weren't quite as good. Next year we win the conference tournament again, and then Spring Hill. I go to Spring Hill.
And Coach, I'm looking at the stats right now. You guys were 73-20 over 3 years at Florida Southern, so probably a pretty nice gamble right there.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well, and we had some really great wins and some great battles against some really good like Troy teams, and it was a lot of fun. And our games with Tampa in those years, and Florida Tech and Rollins, Tommy Klusman's Rollins teams were really good. And I give a quick story here. We played that first year, and Murph breaks his hand. Forget who it was. It was right after Christmas. Might be when we beat Winona State by 70, which is unbelievable. We beat a team by 70, Winona State. But he breaks his hand, and we had a guy, Sherman Johnson. And matter of fact, I think Sherman has passed away. But Sherman was a 30-year-old Air Force guy that played at HCC that was Larry's backup. And Sherman was okay, but we weren't going to win many Sunshine State games with Sherman. He was a good player, but so we're playing Rollins, the first conference game at home, and we don't have Larry Murphy. And we didn't have a lot of depth because 2 guys got kicked off the team right after the Alaska trip. And we were able to survive that. They ended up at Armstrong State with Coach Riley.
Ken Littlefield, we were recruiting him over there.
But anyway, so those 2 guys, we're down in depth after we lost those guys. And so we decided we're going to play Nunez and Calvetti Pate as point guards. Now, Cal was like 6'5", 220, and Nunez was more of an off guard. And so Rollins beats us at the end, and my dad happened to be there. And I think Cal missed a couple free throws, and he had a bad turnover at the end. So we're down there in the locker room and in the office sitting around afterwards. And my dad, long retired by then, and he said, guys, you're asking a guy who never played point guard before in his life to play like 40 minutes against one of the top teams in the country. And, you don't give him much of a break. I think you got as much out of it as you can, but you might want to call a couple timeouts there, or maybe get a sub in for a minute.
I love it.
And, it kind of brought us back because we were like, we were just losing our minds over Cal making a bad decision. But yeah, I mean, we put him in a tough spot. But anyways, Murph comes back and we rebound that year, and I think we ended up like 27-5 or something, and had a heck of a year. And I think Troy State might have beat us up at Troy in the regional.
Now, Coach, we always ask people, were you ready to be a head coach? Were you looking to be a head coach? How did that go down? Were you was it the time, or did it kind of just happen?
Well, actually, it was camp time at Florida Southern, and we didn't have any air conditioning in Jenkins in those days. We did in our offices, so we had a huge team camp, and my job was basically disciplinarian and official. I would make sure the teams that maybe weren't quite as good always had a win or two at camp, and then make sure the dorms were handled while G was entertaining the coaches. And so we're laying down there, and John Dunlop, I don't know if you knew the old Weber coach, John Dunlop. Then he coached at Warner, and I think he's the AD at Warner. John and I were like laying down on the leather couches in the athletic office at dinner time, trying to get some air, because we know we had like 5 more. Gordon had that Midnight Madness, so we're going to referee, another 5 hours in a sweat box. And John said to me, "Hey, that Spring Hill job's open up in Alabama." And I said, "Spring who?" And he said, "Spring Hill. It's a Jesuit school." John was from Syracuse. He said, "It's a Jesuit school just like Lemoyne College up in Syracuse, where your uncle was the AD for 40 years. And I said, "A Catholic school in Alabama? They got Catholics there?" And he was like, "Yeah." He said, and John was doing the sports academy. He was getting his master's degree. So in those days, there wasn't online. It was correspondence. And then you would come up in the summer and do like 6 weeks, and they'd put you at Spring Hill College. And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful school." And so I said, "I don't know. I've got it pretty good here." And we had Andy Robertson coming in, and we just had Jumpin' Johnny Saunders played for us and was a freshman. And I thought we were going to be pretty good. And he said, "No," he said, "you need to apply." So I sent, I call up, and the guy said, "Yeah, it's the last day. Fax your resume." I faxed my resume up. No chance of getting this job. I mean, I know nobody in Alabama. And, well, the guy who's head of the search committee, Booster Club guy, is the golf coach who went to Tampa Jesuit when the G-Man was the coach at Tampa Jesuit.
Oh, everything goes back to Coach G.
So
that's classic. You have a dad that's Canisius Hall of Fame, Buffalo Braves, NBA ties. You have a cousin who's been a long-time head coach at West Virginia and Michigan, and somehow Coach G name keeps popping up to help you out.
It came, and so they called Gordon, and Gordon says, "Yeah, and so I couldn't believe it. I get an interview. I'm one of the 5 interviews. Okay. Jay Pivac, who does stuff with the Timberwolves, was a Minneapolis guy. He was an altar boy for the president. So there was a connection there. Jimmy Tillett was an assistant at Samford. And, Jimmy had a great career, ended up at Samford. Joey Stybine, who went on and coached UNO, got an interview. Happy Osborne from Georgetown, Kentucky, he was an assistant, and then me. So I knew I was fifth. I knew I was fifth, but I did have a good interview. Spring Hill had no gym, but they had a great track record. Drayton Miller, who was a coach on the staff with Joe Williams at Jacksonville when they went to the Final Four, great recruiter. Drayton also worked with Cliff Ellis. He had come after Frank Kearns left Spring Hill. They had some really bad years, and then Drayton came in and got them going again. Then Carl Nash became the head coach, and they had an unbelievable team. And so Carl got a job with Cliff at Clemson, and they had the opening. And so I came in, I had the interview, and I know I was called from the airport. I called Hal Smeltzley, and because he said call. So he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, Hal, I think they'll be calling you, but I think I got a good chance for this job, just some reason." And then I called my wife and said, "You know, you may want to look in about moving to Mobile, Alabama." And she was like, because we had just bought another house in Tampa, because in August, before that August, she was like, "We're going to stay here, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're good." So we just bought another house in Tampa, and we were in it like 7 months. And they called me, and I think everybody else turned them down. So they're like, "Well, here's number 5. This guy will probably be dumb enough to take it." And one of the great things, my dad called me because he had a roundup with Canisius a little bit, and he said, "Well, what'd they tell you?" And I said, "Well, they told me they'd build a gym. That they were about ready to build a gym because we didn't have a gym." And I said, he said, "Do you believe them?" I said, "Yeah, why would they lie?" He's like, "Joe, people lie."
But you had your experience from the Catholic school in Buffalo with no gym.
I was used to it. I was right at home.
That's good stuff. All right, so a lot of your stuff parallels here, other than the fact that you started in Buffalo and now you're in Mobile. But some of the other stuff parallels. You end up having an unbelievable run there, and then you leave there like Tampa, kind of for the crosstown rival, right?
Yeah, and it was funny. I came in, and Carl had a great team, and he left me a couple really good players, and then there was 3 really good recruits. And Bill Elder, Dr. Bill Elder, the legendary Bill Elder, had really built up the University of Mobile from no athletic program to my first year. They were number 1 in the country in the NAI. They were really good. And there was a big crosstown rival, and we got a lot of media. When I got the job at Spring Hill, the media called me, and the NBC affiliate said, "Hey, go down to downtown Tampa. We want to do an interview on the 10 o'clock news." We never got that at Florida Southern or Tampa. And I'm like, "You want me to go downtown?" And so, we got a lot of publicity. So, and it was the Catholics versus the Baptists. It was a big rivalry, religious war. And in the very first game we play at the Mobile Civic Center, 5,000 people. It is just rocking and rolling. And one of the greatest environments, and we lose in overtime to Elder. We were down. This is when I knew I was in a little different environment. Mike Moran came up and was my assistant for that year. The old St. Pete Catholic and King and Plant High School coach, helped Schmidt at Tampa. And we're down 6 with 20 seconds left to Mobile. And I said, "Guys, don't worry. There's light years left in this game. We're gonna make a comeback here." And so they look at me and get out, and they leave the huddle, and one of the guys on the bench walks over and says, Coach, you know, light years is a measure of distance, not time. I looked at Moran. I said, is that true? I said, nowhere else would I coach and somebody come up and say that to me. But anyways, that was, you know, we really had and then we ended up playing Mobile in the championship game at Mobile and beat them to win and go to the NAI national tournament.
And Coach, I know this is your other stop, but I'm looking again. So I was an assistant at Southern Polytech in 2004 when you guys beat us in the first round. So I'm noticing that one. I was like, wait a second, I remember that game.
Yeah, that was, you know, and Mike Helfer, such a great coach. And we had a really good basketball team. And you know, Mike, you know, we were kind of preparing for that pressure he used to like to do, and you know, get up and down, and we come out, and you guys are in a 2-3 zone below the free throw line.
Yeah, but we backed way off the point guard and changed it up.
Wow.
Yeah, we had, you know, Tremaine Perry, we had some good players, but Gabe Fagan, our point guard, he couldn't shoot a lick. And I know he takes a couple early, and you know, he comes down. He said, Coach, they're just backing off me. I said, what's that tell you, Gabe? He said, I can shoot. I'm like, no, they're telling you to shoot it. And once we got Gabe to figure that out, and then we made the run until we run into Kenny Allman's Concordia boys, who just were really strong.
Yeah, I remember that year the bracket just kind of opened up all over the place. You look at it, and that was, to me, the NAI national tournament is one of the coolest basketball venues and events.
Well, it's, you know, that year we beat you guys, and then we had to play Azusa, number 2 in the country, Bill Odell's team, and you know, they were really good. And in that game, you know, we were really pressuring a lot, and we'd play that run and jump all over the place, and they came out firing up because you're going to give up some open threes when you do that. We didn't give up layups. We had the big kid from Trinidad that blocked shots in there, but they came out hitting threes, and then by the end of the half, we started closing the gap, and then the second half, we just kind of wore them down, and then beat Oklahoma City, and then just Concordia was much, you know, we were much more physical than we were. But that, yeah, no, I used to go as a Raider every year to Kansas City, and people don't realize what an unbelievable tournament with unbelievable talent and really, really good coaching. Really good coaching.
And you were at Mobile 20 years or 19?
Well, it was like 20 years basically. Coached there 20 years. And what happened was there was a gentleman, and it was like, well, it was the year we won. We beat them. My very first year, there was this guy came up to me after the game, and he said, Coach, really appreciate you guys did a great job. He goes, I'm going to have you coaching here at Mobile one day. And, you know, people come up to you and say things, and you just, you know, appreciate it, that type of thing. And we kind of flipped the script on Mobile when I got to Spring Hill. We beat them kind of regularly, and before that wasn't quite happening. And so Bill Elder left, and somebody called me from over there that was associated with school and said, would you be interested? Well, I was the dean of students at the time too at the Spring Hill, and I was running student life, and we were building the rec center, the Outlaw Center, having our finally on-campus gym. There was several things going on, and the timing wasn't right. Same time, John Beeline took the Richmond job, and John had called me about Richmond, and you know, I didn't, you know, I thought my brother was a better candidate. He had played for John. he runs the 2-guard stuff probably better than anybody in the country. And so I just passed. Well, when Scott Sanderson left Mobile, they called, and the guy said, "Hey, meet me at Hardee's on Cottage Hill, which is right near my house." And it was that same guy. He said, "What's it going to take for us to get you as our basketball coach?" And, you know, he made things right. So I didn't have to move, didn't have to disrupt my family. I just had to drive about 13 more miles to get to the office.
That's a rare occasion right there, and you've done it really 3 times in your career.
Yeah, because I came back to Spring Hill and still live in the same house.
Oh, that's unbelievable. So how was it after all these years coaching, and of course some of your your uncle had also been an AD a long time, but and you had done the AD and coaching. But how was it when you kind of decided, all right, I'm just gonna be an AD?
Well, you know, it was just like when I became the dean of students. You know, the president asked me to do it, and I knew I'm a basketball coach. And, you know, I really felt bad my last year as a dean of students at Spring Hill. I think we barely got over 500, and we had a really good team. We were banged up a little bit, but I just felt like I did a terrible job. And it was, you know, I didn't do a good job. And so when they approached me to do the job of AD at Mobile, I was like, not, you know, I really don't want to do it. And so a good friend of mine who was the interim AD at the time, he stayed on, but then they came and asked me again. I said, okay, I'll do it for a few years until we can get somebody else in here. And those few years turned into about 14. And if you look at my record, the last 4 or 5 years, we weren't very good. And because we went from like 11 sports to 22 sports, from like 178 athletes to 400 athletes, and you just don't have time to do what you need to do. And so I was actually intent was to step down as the AD and just coach basketball. And and Corey, you're not there yet, but when you get off a bus at 5 in the morning and you're 60 years old, sometimes you wonder, what in the heck are you doing? It's not like you're Krzyzewski or Roy Williams where you're getting off the charter at about 11 p.m. and you're in your bed at 11:30 from a road trip. You're riding that bus all night long, and it can be agonizing, especially when you're not winning.
Yeah. So you end up, a little side note, while you're doing the AD work, you end up doing some Alabama basketball stuff with your time in Alabama coaching, basketball coaching
association.
Yeah, and you ended up, how did that come about?
Well, there was, and I'm glad the guys from North Alabama have really taken the ball and run with it. The basketball coaches in Alabama have never been organized like they are in Florida. And they started, and then it would kind of fall apart. And, like most places in the Southeast, the football coaches dominate everything. So it had been knocked around ever since I've been here to try to do it. Well, a local AAU coach approached Ronnie Arrow and myself. Ronnie's retired, lives here, South Alabama, and said, hey, we really need to do this. So we started it. Ronnie was the first president. I was the executive director. And, we had our first clinic and it went pretty well. And we were trying to get things going. And then eventually a young man who played at Huntsville, they've got it going and it's now growing. But I used Jim Haley, some basketball stuff, Larry Brown, longtime assistant and head coach, good friend of Ronnie's, gave us some Texas stuff too. He was also involved with Haley in Florida. So we had the foundation ready to go. And, we're not near where we need to be, but it's growing. That it's good to see basketball grow in Alabama now with Bruce Pearl here and Nate Oates and Andy Kennedy. Those guys starting to get involved will make it even bigger.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you're kind of the elder spokesman now of Alabama hoops. A good old Buffalo via Florida guy.
Yeah, it's wild. Sometimes I think, and Mobile's a beautiful place, and we're one of the oldest cities in the country, and we're down here on the Gulf Coast, and it rains a lot in the summer, but it's really a beautiful place, and we're near the beaches and stuff. But to think growing up in Buffalo, I'd ever end up in Mobile, Alabama, it's unbelievable.
Well, before we go to the lightning round, give us the quick family business tree. I know your son is in it now as well. Kind of walk us through. I know it obviously, but people that are listening, your brother, he's at one of the Penn State, the D3 schools, and kind of walk us through all that. Your cousins, obviously, talked about your dad already. Mentioned your uncle and some of the others, if you don't mind.
Canisius College. He was with the head scout of the Buffalo Braves, and of course, I mentioned it. I couldn't find the picture, but he coached Dr. J before he was Dr. J against the Soviets. Then my Uncle Tom actually was the first basketball, baseball coach and athletic director at Lemoyne College in Syracuse. Coached there from 47 to 72. Was the AD from 47 to 1990. He also sat on the NCAA infractions committee, the only coach to sit on the NCAA infractions committee. He had a couple sons that coached at CBA in Syracuse, Tommy and John. And then my Uncle Mike, who I played football for in high school my senior year, was a longtime Catholic League coach in the Buffalo area. And he actually, Hank Nichols, you've heard of Hank Nichols, right? The longtime basketball official back in the day. He played for my uncle at Bishop Duffy in Niagara Falls. And then, of course, my dad's sister, my Aunt Josephine, married Art Beeline, and that's where John Beeline. That's my first cousin. He grew up in Burt, New York, which is just above Lockport over on Lake Ontario. We used to call it we'd go to the Beelines, we were going to the country. And they lived out in the country. And of course, John went down and played at Wheeling Jesuit, and then coached Erie Community, and then all the way to Michigan. And terrific career, as good as they get. He coached at Lemoyne and coached my brother David. My brother David's about 8 years younger than me, and when he got out at Lemoyne, he was a graduate assistant at Canisius for Marty Marbach. And Marbach got let go, and John got the job. And the reason the two guard offense got started is because my brother was the point guard at Lemoyne, and so they didn't want a scoring point guard, so John developed the two guard offense. And my brother became the head coach at Penn State Barron College in Erie, PA, which used to be an NAI school. He's won over 500 games, been to numerous NCAA tournaments. He just got inducted to the Greater Erie Sports Hall of Fame this summer. His son, Andy, is a video guy with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a GA with St. Francis of Pennsylvania. One of my brother's former players, Pat St. John, is an assistant with the Bucks. Andy was able to get on with the Bucks. My cousin Tommy Beeline's son, Billy Beeline, was an assistant GA for me at Mobile, has been the longtime head coach at Niagara Community College, and been to several Division II National Junior College tournament. Very successful coach. Has done very, very, very well. My son Patrick was a graduate assistant at Alabama for a couple years, along with Avery Johnson, and one with Nate Oates is now the assistant basketball coach here at Spring Hill College. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but yeah, there's a lot of coaches in the family.
Man, that's awesome. That might be the first we've had on this show where we have a coaching tree within the family tree that deep. That's awesome right there. All right, Joe, we're going to take us to the lightning round. So what it'll be is I've got about 3 questions. Bowles has got about 3 questions. We get the shot clock on for these. We go a little quicker. Some will be basketball. Some will be food, because that's my favorite part. And then we'll wrap it up and let you do a little closing before we go. But all right, so in the lightning round, I'll start off with food. You've been at Mobile a long time now. What's the best place if I came into Mobile tonight or tomorrow? Where are you taking me to eat?
Probably Felix's Fish Camp on the Causeway. Great seafood.
Nice. All right, what's your Lakeland / Tampa spot?
La Teresita over on Columbus. It's a great Cuban restaurant.
All right, now we're up in the cold in Buffalo. Where are you taking us?
Maybe Sinatra's for Italian food over on Kenmore, or my brother-in-law owns a couple places, so I got to be careful. Maybe 800 Maple, or maybe just Duff's to get some chicken wings.
I like it. All right, and then getting back to basketball, with you being in so many different places, this one should be good. Worst gym you've ever played in or coached in?
There's been some bad ones. Probably it's probably Selma University, their old gym. That's probably, or the late Buster Harvey when they used to play in the middle school over there in Jacksonville. Edward Waters.
That was the most dangerous for sure. All right. And now give me the best crowd, the best environment you played in.
Oh, it probably the old barn, Xavier. They play in a beautiful arena now, but when they played in that old barn at Xavier, and you had the Xavier cheerleaders dancing under the basket and the band going, there was no place like it. It was intimate. It's not there anymore, but it's one of those places you had experience.
My first or second year as an assistant coach at Clayton, we played there in a tournament. It was pretty amazing. All right, this is my favorite one. I've been asking this probably the last 10 or 12 guests we've had, and it's become my favorite question because it's so off the beaten path type question, okay, with our show. You've made it kind of big time, obviously, starting all the stuff, all the wins you had. You done USA basketball stuff, all this. What's the one time you maybe thought you got a little big and then you got humbled? Maybe somebody thought you were the girls' coach at a local high school or didn't know who you were or whatever, just one of those times where you got humbled and you had to just laugh to yourself.
Probably when I got kicked out of the 13 and under AAU state tournament game when I was coaching.
That's good. That's a good one. Yeah. What did you say to get kicked out? We got to ask.
And it really wasn't, I wasn't as bad as my mentor, Gordon, on that. But I stepped out of the box is basically what happened. And Corey, I've watched you enough. Nobody ever stays in the coaching box, but I just happen to have 2 of those AAU 13U officials that were enforcing it.
Yeah, I would be in trouble in that game. All right, Bowles, take over. Your lightning round here.
All right, I'm going. The first one's non-basketball, but just hearing you talk makes this one kind of came up. Worst weather in the winter in Buffalo or the summer in Florida?
That's a good question.
Boy, that's a really good question. I the old story of walking uphill both to and from school in the snow. If you've ever been walking in Buffalo in May and it's freezing and you're getting sleet on you, that's not winter, it's May. So but at the same time, when it's 100 degrees and you're sweating it out, they're about even. Only I prefer warm weather, so I'll say Buffalo weather is the worst.
There you go.
That's a great question.
All right. So in all of your years of coaching, if you could go back for one game, what's one game you wish you had it back? Could do it again.
That's a real good question. Probably probably the Oklahoma City loss in the first round of the 205, I think it was. That team was the year after we played you guys at Southern Poly, and we should have won the national tournament that year, and they upset us in the very first game.
Yeah, we got upset in the second round that year. We got beat by Biola. They knocked us out, and it's one of those you always look back at. Those games are crazy though. You never know what's going to happen there. Especially if you're the 9 a.m. game.
Which somehow I got that game a lot.
All right, and then I guess my last one. You can choose. Some of the younger guys go podcast. We usually go with book. If you had to take one book that you would recommend or that you love, what's your book recommendation or podcast recommendation if you want to go the technology route?
One book I really enjoyed reading, and I think it gives you a perspective of history, but it's called When Pride Still Mattered. It's a book about Vince Lombardi, and that's probably the most enjoyable book that had a lot of insight on a lot of things.
Nice.
I like that. That's a good one. I'm gonna actually look that up.
I think this is the first time we've ever kept every lightning round question under the shot clock.
I know. Hey, we owe him a beer on that one. That's good. That's good, Searle. Like that. Searle's gonna.
Well, if you're like the G, we'll be waiting for a long time.
Yeah, with G, I think we only asked 1 or 2 lightning rounds. I don't think we went all the way in. We had to just turn the shot clock off and move on. All right. Well, Joe, you got anything you want to close on? Anything you want to say or didn't get to say? Or
Well, we're all been in basketball, and basketball's like any sport. It's just there's so much good that happens that comes out of basketball, and I was on texting back and forth with one of my former players and assistant coaches, and just talking about guys and how well you look back and how well they've done in life. And I think most coaches get into, obviously you love the game, you love to compete, but you also love to build people up and in our cases make better men and give them opportunities to go on and be contributors and I think that's what the wins and losses come and go, but at the end it's about the relationships and building people up to go on and be successful.
And Coach, and that's been
good stuff.
Yeah, that's been kind of a common theme with the podcast. Dave Davis talked about relationships, and you talked early on about guys at the beginning chasing that logo on your polo, and once you're in it for a long enough time, you start to realize what really matters. So thank you for sharing. You've taken us all over the place. It's not the furthest geographically we've had, but maybe the biggest weather extremes from anybody, I guess.
And we really appreciate Joe coming on. I know I'm in the dark over here. I've been off and on here while driving. I apologize, but We appreciate Joe coming on, an unbelievable career, and one of the few administrators who has left that's in coaching. You know, now administrators usually are not coaches, so everybody's gonna probably text you and email you and expect you to hire them after hearing this, because you've been on that same path they're on. But we really appreciate you coming on, and you've always been good to me and helped me. Obviously, being in Coach G's family, I guess we're semi-related as well. So I go on the family tree now too. But really appreciate you taking time out, and I'll close us out here. We're a place for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are coaching, those who follow coaches, and those who hire and fire them. And this is Off the Beaten Path. And we're out. Appreciate you, Joe.
Thank you, Coach.